Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus Mame review. Today we're going to be taking a look at the real Ghostbusters released in 1987 by Data East. Now this game is like kind of loosely based off of the real Ghostbusters cartoon and the 1984 original Ghostbusters movie, but in Japan this game actually had a completely different name, and of course it didn't have the Ghostbusters license at all because it was rather unknown in Japan at the time. But here in the US it was known as the real Ghostbusters and was available in 2 and 3 player versions. And you play as one of the Ghostbusters. And basically it's kind of like a Smash TV, Akari Warriors-esque game where there are all these enemies all around and you have to defeat them. So, it's a bit of a different game than you'd be expecting from like something like Ghostbusters, but one of the weird mechanics in this is that to actually gain extra score, and when I was first playing this, I had no idea that these little spiky guys that I was trying to zap there can't be killed, they're just kind of like a hazard, but when you defeat the enemies, they actually turn into like ghosts, and by shooting them with your beam, you can actually catch the ghosts. So, the more ghosts you catch, the more extra lives you get at the end of the round. And every 100 ghosts that you catch, you get an extra life, which really doesn't help all that much considering every credit you use, you get 3 lives. But in Japan, this game was known as Make-You Hunter G. And they say that the name translates roughly to Labyrinth Hunter G in Japanese. And it was released in May of 1987. And as I said here, you have various different monsters and everything. What I will do is at the very end of this video, if you want to see it, I will insert a short clip of what the Japanese version looks like. Just like the, you know how you have the title screen and the slight demo play there of the game. And you'll see that it's pretty much the same game, but they just didn't have Ghostbusters as a license. They had it just more or less has its own game. And something tells me, it doesn't say this in the history.dats, but in the US, they probably just licensed this as the real Ghostbusters because it was a way to basically bring this unknown game to the USA and have people actually like it, because this was only 3 years after the original film came out, and at the time the cartoon was still quite popular, hence the name The Real Ghostbusters. Now, strangely enough, this actually has a port in Japan only on Game Boy as Mickey Mouse 4 Mayo no Labyrinth for some reason. I guess that was like a long series of games, and this game just happened to kind of get a port as the 4th game in a Mickey Mouse game series. But as I said, this is available in both 2-player and 3-player variants. What you're seeing me play right now is the 2-player US ROM. But there's also the first revision 2-player ROM, and then there's the second revision 2-player ROM, which you see here, and then of course the 3-player USA ROM. The only big difference I saw between the first revision and second revision ROMs is that the first revision ROM, your gun starts out as like just shooting, and you'll eventually get powered up and you'll have the beam. But I guess they figured that people who played a Ghostbusters game would expect the Ghostbusters to use their proton beams and not just like shoot. So this version, by default, when you start out, unless you get a power down thing, which will look like a little skull and crossbones, which I actually will get later on in this gameplay, but unless you get the Skull and Crossbones power down thing, you'll always have the beam. And when you get the Ghostbusters logo, you get this, like, really super beam that goes across the screen and kills most stuff fairly easily. And of course, it takes a lot less shooting to catch the ghost in your beam, which, in my opinion, is a bit strange because in the movies, and I believe in the cartoons as well, they always use the ghost traps, but I guess they figured it just made it an easier mechanic. And now what the two buttons do in this game is the one button will do your beam, and then the other button will do that, like, shooting thing that you'll see me do. Because if I die and I come back, you'll see the amount of lives, and it'll say, and fire. And that means that I can do that thing where he twirls around and shoots the fire that you just saw me do about a second ago. Which, it's really helpful on some enemies, and of course bosses like this one. Especially with its, like, long neck, where it's really going to get you really bad. Now, to give you a bit of technical on this hardware, its main CPU is an HD 6309. The sound CPU is an MOS Technology M6502, and then it has two sound chips, the YM2203 and the YM3812. So, it's fairly simple hardware, nothing too advanced. And of course it used an 8-way joystick, and as I just mentioned, 2 buttons. And for some reason, when all the enemies explode, they explode into like these little targets, which makes me think of the store Target. It explodes into like their logo, basically. No, it's not going to be this time. I was going to say, eventually you'll see the ghost number go over 100, and when that happens, it gives me 1 extra life. Which, it's probably one of those things that if you were actually using points to play this game, it would actually be worth it to get extra lives, but since, you know, I'm playing it on an emulator and I have unlimited credits, it doesn't really matter. But one thing that's a bit strange about this, like, as opposed to games like Gauntlet Legends, where, well, actually, that actually isn't a good example at all, because Gauntlet Legends more or less does the same thing, but the way that the credits in this game work is the credits are in a credit pool, like in the bottom of the screen. You'll see there's none right now. By pressing start, you take credits and convert them into lives. So, when you press your start button, you're taking credits away from the pool. So, let's say your friend put in like 5 credits and he was about to press start and you press it first. Since there's only 1 credit pool in the machine, you kind of would be screwing him out of his credits that he just put in. And what I was saying before is it's kind of just like Gauntlet Legends, where credits stay in 1 pool, and when you press start, you actually add health to your character in Gauntlet Legends and Dark Legacy. Whereas a lot of games, the credits will stay on the bottom of the screen until somebody dies and needs to continue, and then you press start and use a credit to continue and get however many lives. It's not like in this game or Gauntlet Legends where you can use multiple credits to stockpile a lot of lives, as in this game, or a lot of life like in Gauntlet Legends. So, if you're ever playing a real Ghostbusters or Make You Hunter G on location, make sure you're not stealing your fellow players' credits, because I wouldn't doubt if this is actually real quarters or real yen, they're not going to be happy that you're stealing their money. But I don't know what happens when the time runs out, because I've never had that happen through this whole gameplay. And I will tell you right here, since there actually are only 10 stages, which in my opinion was a bit disappointing, I actually do a complete gameplay. So if you want to actually watch that full gameplay, go ahead, but otherwise, I can give you my recommendation right now after almost about 3 stages here. But the real Ghostbusters, or Make You Hunter G, is a pretty fun game. I would say probably much more fun if you have 2 or more players to play with, because like any of these games, be it Smash TV or Akari Warriors, if you have somebody else to play with, it's not going to be the same run and gun type experience where you're just having to take down every enemy that's on the screen. I'd even go as far as to say it's a lot like Gauntlet, where if you have more than one person, that game's just a lot more fun to play. So, if you're not wanting to see the rest of this video, this has been another Game Nexus Mame review, and I shall see you later. But for everyone who's going to stay on and watch the rest of this gameplay for stages 4 to 10, then, yeah, let's continue to take a look here. Now, I didn't really say too much in the beginning there, but there's several series of power-ups here. If you get like a Ghost Trap power-up, that just strengthens your beam and gives you basically more attack power. Because you'll notice as you're playing the game, the power of the beam will go down or up depending on those power-ups. And of course, it gets supercharged if you get the Ghostbusters logo power-up. The other power-up I've seen in this game, well, power down, if you will, would be the Skull and Crossbones, which actually will power down your beam, and if you have a regular strength beam, there it is, it'll actually turn it into just the regular shooting, which basically you saw for a second there before I died, which is just like shooting from like a pellet gun, if you will. So, it does make the game a little harder to play, but if you have that like pellet gun type thing and you don't die, if you get the Ghost Trap power-ups, it'll bring you back to your regular proton beam. So, there are ways to get away from that. And of course, if you're playing on a version 1 board, you will have to start out with the pellet beam, just like the regular shooting there. And as I said, watch out for these guys. They're like your environmental hazard. They can't be killed, and they'll just jut out of the ground. And as you can see in this part, sometimes ad nauseum, there'll be so many of them that, yeah, there's nothing you can do to avoid them sometimes if you're just walking out and this is your first time playing this game. And now, just to give you a brief, like, background, I remember watching the Real Ghostbusters cartoon a lot when I was young, and the one thing that I remember the most is, like, just like the Ninja Turtles, you know how in the movie the Ghostbusters actually wore all the same outfit? Well, if you remember right, in the cartoon The Real Ghostbusters, they all wore different colors, and my guess would be just like Ninja Turtles, it made it easier for children to tell them apart. Because you were like, oh, well, Ray wears kind of a brown suit, and let me just see if I can, because I had a few of the figures when I was young, the actual Real Ghostbusters figures. I remember Egon wearing green, Ray wearing, like, brown. And, oh, and the funny part is, if you want to know something strange, I don't know if this is actually what the truth is about this game, but in history.dat for MakeU Hunter G, it actually says Ray, Egon, and Winston shoot their way through ghosts which haunt Manhattan. Which, if that actually is true about this game, it's funny to think that, like, all of the American-made Ghostbusters games, they leave out Winston, so it's usually like Peter, Ray, and Egon. Whereas this is like kind of the opposite way around, where they actually left out Peter. So, that's how they can justify only having a 3-player mode. I know the first time I had actually seen this game, I was thinking it would be a 4-player game, but the only versions, as I said, are 2 and 3 players. So, yeah, there is no, all 4 Ghostbusters finally unite to, defeat evil, if you will. Yeah, you gotta watch out for some of these enemies. They will swarm you before you know it. But as I was saying, I watched a lot of the Real Ghostbusters cartoon when I was young, and I can in fact say, like, I think I may have seen the cartoon before I saw the actual movie, because at the time the movie came out, I believe I was like 2 years old, so it wouldn't have been something I understood. And when I got old enough to understand, like, the cartoon was on, and it was something that was a bit more approachable for like a little kid, as you would imagine. And if you want to know a bit more about the real Ghostbusters cartoon, the cartoon ran for a total of 140 episodes in 7 seasons. And the cool part is it was actually created by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, so it wasn't like somebody was like, you know what? This movie is like really popular. Let's just take make a cartoon series. But the series ran from 1986 to 1991, September 13th, 1986 to October 5th, 1991 to be exact, and was produced by Columbia Pictures Television and DSC Enterprises, Coca-Cola Telecommunications, and J. Michael Staworski was a story editor and wrote episodes for every season except for 4 and 7. The reel was added to the title after a dispute with Filmation and its Ghostbusters properties. And of course, the series continues the adventures of paranormal investigators Dr. Peter Venkman, Dr. Egon Spengler, Dr. Ray Stantz, and Winston Zedmore with their secretary, Janine Melnitz, and their mascot Ghost Slimer. There were also 2 ongoing Real Ghostbusters comics, one published monthly by Now Comics in the US and the other published weekly, originally bi-weekly, by Marvel Comics in the United Kingdom, and a popular toy line manufactured by Kenner, because as I had mentioned, I had a lot of the toys when I was young, and I wouldn't doubt if I looked in my closet, I probably still have a few of my original Real Ghostbusters toys. The one that I really remember having is it was a Peter Venkman toy, where when you squeeze the arm, his eyeballs jutted out and his hair went up and his mouth opened. That's the one that I remember the most that I had. I believe I might have had a Ray or Egon, like, regular toy, not the crazy one with the mouth opening all crazy, but yeah, it was one of those like shows up there with like Ninja Turtles that I always watched when I was young. And as I had mentioned, it wasn't until later that I had actually seen the actual Ghostbusters movie. And of course, I remember at the time thinking, why is this movie so different compared to the cartoon I'm so used to? And what I really should have been asking is why the cartoon was so different from the movie I was used to, like, Egon having darker hair instead of his more blonde hair from the cartoon. And now what I was saying before is, okay, it was actually Peter who had the dark brown suit. Ray's was more of a light tan. Egon's being kind of a light green, and then Winston's being a light blue. So that's how they all looked. And all of their hair kind of was changed a little bit. Like, Egon was made into a blonde, Ray was made into more of a redhead, and then of course Winston had like the charcoal black hair, and Peter, it looks like they just left his hair pretty much like a dark brown / black color, so they didn't really change much when it came to Peter's hair. And now, if you haven't seen already, this is already stage 6, but every stage in this game like ends with a different boss, with some of the later stages like ending with a couple of the bosses from earlier stages. But I can remember when I was young, I would always wonder why it was called the Real Ghostbusters, since I knew absolutely nothing about Filmation's Ghostbusters TV show and cartoon series, so like, the real Ghostbusters I thought was kind of a weird name at the time, until, like, years later that I found out that, there actually was this show and cartoon called Ghostbusters that was absolutely nothing like either of the movies or the cartoon series I like so much. I would have to say, like, something like that was more, like, proliferated with, like, me really knowing more about it because of, the, internet. And what's really funny is that for, 3 seasons, Arsenio Hall, who was, like, a, talk show host, actually had done the voice of Winston, which I just think was kind of funny. You wouldn't think, like, Arsenio Hall. I always think of him as that guy who, just did a talk show myself. And now, like I had mentioned earlier, at the same time the real Ghostbusters was being created, Filmation was creating a cartoon simply known as Ghostbusters, which was a revamp of their 1970s TV series, The Ghostbusters. So, that's why they had to change it to The Real Ghostbusters. And later episodes became known as Slimer and The Real Ghostbusters. And now, I know, like, James Rolfe mentioned it in one of his videos, but I just had to mention this here. But the guy who did the voice of Garfield in the Garfield and Friends cartoon actually did the voice of Peter Venkman in the Real Ghostbusters cartoon. And then a funny thing would be is that Bill Murray eventually would do the voice of Garfield in the Garfield live-action movies. So it kind of went full circle in that respect. Now, I'm gonna give a brief review of the new Ghostbusters movie that at the time of recording this actually just came out today, July 15th of 2016. I actually had seen it in the theater myself today, and I have to say, nothing negative against the film, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. My biggest gripe with the whole, new Ghostbusters movie, or as I tend to call it these days, Ghostbuster 2016, is that the character development in the film is very weak. The most we know about any of the characters is that they're like scientists who studied the paranormal. They wrote a book. They didn't really want the book to be, the one girl was like a serious teacher. She didn't want the book to be like well known because it was kind of her like crazy college days type thing, and she didn't want anyone to know. And then of course the African American character was a subway worker who happened to see a ghost, and then she kind of joined the team. And then of course the quote-unquote eye candy of Chris Hemsworth is the bumbling secretary. And pretty much when it comes to the movie, that's all the character development you have. The 3 scientist characters are smart. The African-American character, quote-unquote, knows New York, but the thing, in my opinion, with that line, they really don't show that she knows New York, other than her relative, who, you find out is played by Ernie Hudson in one of the last scenes of the movie, has a mortuary, which they get the hearse from, for the car. That's all, like, her being in New York really attributes to the whole thing. It's a nice joke and all, but in my opinion, it really doesn't... None of the character development really was there. And another thing that really bugged me a little bit about the new film was that, the characters kind of act a bit over the top at times. Like, when they first catch a ghost, they're all jumping and dancing around and making loud noises, and I thought to myself, you know, we could, like, cut some of these scenes and work on a bit more character development, so like the original films, we actually care a bit more about the characters. And of course, then there's the villain. He's some guy who's all mad that nobody likes him and nobody associates with him, so he wants to basically open a portal to, like, a ghost dimension and get all the ghosts to be in the place, and that's his motivation. That's all there is. But all in all, I have to say that it was a good movie. This is my bottom line when it comes to the film. It was a good movie that could have been a great movie if they had just tightened up the script a bit, got rid of some of the goofiness, and just more or less worked on the script itself a bit more, as opposed to being like, hey, we got this Ghostbusters property, so let's like get a movie out quickly with it. But I do recommend you see the movie if you like the Ghostbusters, regardless of where you fall on this whole like quote-unquote gender war thing. I do have to admit I'm not exactly happy when it comes to the whole it being a reboot and not a sequel, but what can you do, really? But I do recommend Ghostbusters 2016 to anybody who likes Ghostbusters and is not blinded by gender bias, or that it wasn't made by the original guys. All of the surviving Ghostbusters cast members, which would be Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and Annie Potts, actually make an appearance in the film, which is actually pretty cool. The only one I had briefly mentioned, of course, was Ernie Hudson's, because he was seen toward the end of the film. And another thing I want to say is, if you have not seen Ghostbusters yet, stay till the very end, because there are like some funny scenes with Chris Hemsworth's character kind of dancing through the credits, and then at the very end, there actually is an end of credit scene, which I can't say I wasn't like 100% expecting, but it was a nice little surprise just to get like a little extra for your money, if you will. So I went in with an open mind, not expecting much, and was pleasantly surprised by basically a decently good film that I would say, if it does well enough, maybe it might launch a franchise, or maybe if you're watching this like 20 years from now, for all I know, it could have been a one-off and Ghostbusters was never touched again. But yeah, I did enjoy that movie, even though, as I said, it was a remake and not a sequel, which is still the most disappointing part, but they put together a decent film nonetheless. But back to this game, as we are on the next to last level at this point. Basically, just like any game that like this, what the next to last level more or less does is throws as many enemies at you at once. So like, you're basically swarmed. Like, a lot of times, like this one part here that you just saw me do, if you don't use that fire thing for some of the screens to clear them, you're gonna get killed so many times. And I wouldn't doubt in this whole playthrough, I probably used like a lot of credits. And now what you see here is actually 2 bosses from the game in one boss battle. So I hope you enjoyed them earlier, but now you're gonna have to fight them together. And these kind of like Ghost/Reaper guys, they were not bad, but having to fight them along with Eyeball Guy, who is constantly hitting you with his eyeball, and just like Contra or any other games of the like, you die from like one hit. It yeah, ends up being a bit annoying that you have to face all these enemies at once. But once you can just isolate this one enemy, it's not as bad to dodge like his giant eyeball, but you kind of get his patterns down, and as I said, it's not that bad. It was one of those boss battles that was a bit annoying when all 3 of them were still alive. And then we all see our target logos, and I just wanted to see if there was something else over there, which of course there was not. And that's the end of the next to last stage. One more level to go. And apparently, as you'll see in a little while, the ghost count is something that's added to your high score. And for the final level, we're actually back to the more urban environment, as opposed to like kind of those weird environments in the other levels. And now, I honestly have no idea if any of the ghosts in this game are actually from the cartoon series, because you gotta remember, that was a long time ago, and yeah, I really don't remember all of the ghosts from the show. I remember they were a lot of them were really crazy designs, but yeah, they're kind of something of the ilk. And as I said, in the closing of this video, what I will do, so if you stuck around this long, which we only have a few more minutes of this video left, what I will do is at the very end of this video, I will throw on a brief clip of the, attract mode slash, and if you saw there was a little bit of that, default shooting that wasn't the beam, but I'll throw on a little bit of the attract mode of, My Q Hunter G, so you can see what the Japanese version of this game looked like. The big differences, of course, will be the music is different, because it's not going to play the Ghostbusters theme if it really isn't Ghostbusters licensed. And as I said, I wouldn't doubt that in Japan, Ghostbusters wasn't really known at the time, so calling something of a popular property in one country into another country would probably be a bad idea, because nobody would be like, oh my god, I gotta watch that movie because or I gotta play that game because I know that movie. But if the movie is relatively unknown in the other country, they're not gonna call it that. As I said, my idea here was they probably just changed the name and some of the aesthetics of this game and released it as the real Ghostbusters to tie in with the whole cartoon slash movie aspect. And you definitely have to give them credit that within 2 years of the movie coming out, they put the cartoon out, and then the following year, this video game came out, which I can honestly say feels kind of like Ghostbusters, but it really has that Smash TV slash Akari Warriors type feel, where you're a character that shoots and you can turn in all 8 directions. So it's kind of fun in that aspect. If you like these kind of shooter games, then you will love this game, I won't kid you. It is a really fun game. The only thing that gets annoying is, just like the original Nintendo Ghostbusters game, you constantly hear that rendition of the Ghostbusters theme for the whole game, except for the boss battles and this last part. All stages cleared, who you gonna call? And then I guess the ghosts get away, which makes no sense. So I guess our heroes have to go and bust some more ghosts. But the thing is, even if you add more lives, as you notice I have over 10 lives there, you can't continue to play. You just have to register your name, and I guess you could put some more coins in and play again if you really wanted to. But yeah, that is the real Ghostbusters, or Make Q Hunter G. And this has been another Game Nexus Mame review, and I shall see you later. And if you'd like, stay tuned for that brief glimpse of the Japanese version. Bye.